guys, and welcome to Storytime. Today, we are going to be reading one of my favorite stories, Extra Yarn by Barnett, illustrated by John Klassen. This is one of my favorite stories because these are some of my favorite authors and illustrators. When they team up, they make the best books. No doubt about it. So, let's read Extra Yarn. Oh wait, I have to ask a question. What are we focusing on before we read this? We are going to focus on story elements, but not just any story element. We're going to be focusing on the setting. You don't know what the setting is? Oh, let me help you out there. The setting of a story is where it takes place and when it takes place. So, if you're thinking of a story you might know, the setting could be the beach, it could be the mountains, it could be at night or during dinner time, anything like that. It doesn't have anything to do with the characters, doesn't have anything to do with the problem or the solution, but it could affect those things. So, let's focus on setting as we read Extra Yarn. I hope you like this as much as I do. This is one of my favorite books. I'm going to try to use my voice to show all the different types of characters. Extra Yarn by Barnett, illustrated by John Klassen. That's the dream team right there. All right, here's our first page, and before I read, I'm going to look at the pictures to give myself a little bit of a clue about the setting. I'm looking around, and here's a few things I notice. I'm noticing that there are not many colors. I'm noticing that there's a lot of white and a lot of dark brownish, blackish, grayish. So it makes me think that there's a lot of snow. So the setting might be during wintertime or just a very, very cold place. So maybe that has something to do with the setting. So we'll see. On a cold afternoon in a cold little town, where everywhere you looked was either the white of snow or the black of soot from chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled with yarn of every color. Okay, so when I read the text, it did tell me that this is a cold little town. So the picture gave me the right clue. It is a cold little town. Also from the text, I saw that there's a little girl named Annabelle. She also has this little dog, and she found this little box, and the box is filled with yarn. I wonder how this will affect the setting of the story. So she went home and knit herself a sweater. And when Annabelle was done, she had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars too. But there was still extra yarn. How much yarn is in this box? So far, she's made sweaters for herself and for Mars. Let's go back to the first page really quick. Let's look at the difference. Note how Annabelle and Mars look on this page. They kind of look like the background, all blackish like soot and whitish like the snow, not a lot of color. But now, Annabelle has this beautiful, colorful sweater, and so does Mars too. And she even is using a leash made of the yarn. I don't think it's affected the setting much though, because if I look in the background, same colors, same snow, same time. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. Well, I think he might be. But it turned out he was. Even after she'd made a sweater for Nate and his dog, and for herself and for Mars, she still had, you guessed it, extra yarn. This might be a magic box because the yarn is not running out at all. Now, Nate and his dog got sweaters from Annabelle, but do their sweaters look the same as Annabelle and Mars' sweaters? No? How are they different? And how are they similar? At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet!" shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone! Annabelle, that sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning around to look at you." "Then I'll knit one for everyone," Annabelle said, "so they won't have to turn around." "Impossible!" said Mr. Norman. "You can't." Well, before we turn the page and see if she could or couldn't, take a look at the picture here. Same colors as before, even though they're inside a classroom? I think so. Do you think this town is very colorful? I don't think it is. So Mr. Norman said she couldn't knit everybody's sweaters. But it turned out she could, and she did. Even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she knit sweaters for her mom and dad, and for Mr. Pendleton and Mrs. Pendleton, for Dr. Palmer, and for little Louise. She made sweaters for everyone except Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters or even long pants, and who would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. "No sweater for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat, and even then, Annabelle still had extra yarn. That was very considerate of her. He does not like sweaters, so did she knit a sweater anyway? She knit him a hat instead. She took that into consideration when she made him something. She made sweaters for all the dogs and all the cats and for other animals too. What other animals? Is that a bear? And a rabbit? Wait a minute. They look kind of familiar. I think I've seen them in another book somewhere. Soon, people thought, soon Annabelle will run out of yarn. So Annabelle made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters. Like what? Let's take a look. Do mailboxes normally wear sweaters? Do birdhouses and birds normally wear sweaters? Do houses normally wear sweaters? I don't think so. Things began to change in that little town. Well, look at this. Didn't we say at the beginning of the story that we would focus on the setting? Well, the setting is starting to change. From the beginning, let's take a look back then. If we turn back to the beginning, we see a lot of the same colors. But now, what's different? Has Annabelle changed the setting? Maybe you can come up with that yourself. News spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabelle's hand. Why did they travel from all over the world? And why did they want to shake her hand? Maybe they were impressed. Maybe they wanted to meet this girl who could make all these things from yarn. One day, an archduke who was very fond of clothes sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabelle. You know, while I was reading that, I was starting to think, oh wow, here's another character who's so impressed and wants to meet Annabelle. But then it used this word, demanded to see Annabelle. That changes my mind about the character. I have a feeling this Archduke might be bringing us the first problem of the story. "Little girl," said the Archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I am willing to offer you $1 million. "No, thank you," said Annabelle, who was knitting a sweater for a pickup truck. The Archduke's mustache twitched. $2 million, he said. Annabelle shook her head. "No, thanks." $10 million, shouted the Archduke. "Take it or leave it." "Leave believe it, said Annabelle. I won't sell the yarn. And she didn't. Well, the Archduke sure offered a lot of money. He didn't do it very politely, but he did offer her a lot of money for that box of yarn. But Annabelle does not want to sell it. I wonder why not. And I wonder what the Archduke is going to do, since she won't sell the yarn. It's nighttime now. So that night, the Archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabelle's house, and they stole the box and took it to the Archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea. Oh no. This is a big problem. Our protagonist, Annabelle, wants to use the yarn, but the Archduke has stolen the yarn. She can't do what she wants to do anymore. That is a big problem. In order for there to be a solution, Annabelle has to get the yarn back or change her mind about what she wants. Let's see what happens. Oh, wait. Did the setting change? It did, even though it's that little town. The time is different. So far, all we've seen is daytime, but now it's nighttime. Back to his castle, he took the yarn. The Archduke put on his favorite song and sat in his best chair. Then he took out the box, he lifted the lid, and he looked inside. What do you think he saw? Oh no, the yarn is all gone. His mustache quivered. It shivered. It trembled. The Archduke hurled the box out the window and shouted, "Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse. You will never be happy again." Ooh, what a curse. Now it was nighttime. Take a look in the background. Looks like the sun is halfway from the horizon to up in the sky. That means that it must be dawn. But, look, the box of yarn fell onto this ice, and the ice is floating in the water, and it's moving. Where do you think it's going to end up? Look, Annabelle found it. It floated right back to her. Now, the last thing we heard was the Archduke cursing her. Then it said, but it turned out she was happy after all. Did the Archduke's curse work? No. She was just as happy as she wanted to be. She got the yarn back, she kept knitting, and she got what she wanted. That means that we have a solution. Friends, I asked you to focus on the setting throughout the story. Can you imagine the story taking place in a different setting? A more colorful setting? Would the story still make sense? Or does it make sense to be in a place that doesn't have a lot of color so that the yarn, which is colorful, brightens up the whole place and makes the characters more happy? Think about that. What would it be like if the story was on the beach or on the moon or in the jungle? Woof, that would be crazy. All right, friends. Thanks for coming to Storytime. Bye.